I'm Sawyer, and you're listening to Our House, A to Z.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Our House.
A to Z.
A to Z still.
Ashley to Zac.
Z to A. No, doesn't have a nice ring. Had to be A to Z.
A to Z.
I like it.
A to Z Mysteries. Kids book series.
Oh, I feel like we're pros about kids book series.
I'm not going to lie. I feel a little bit sad that we don't read to the kids anymore. There were days when it seemed like a pain in the butt.
I'm going to tell you, the kids would probably still love it if you read to them.
But now they read to themselves, and it's important that they're
yes, of course,
doing their reading and things like that. But it's I loved being in the middle of a good story and going through the stuff. I mean, some of them were terrible.
Yeah.
But it was so many years of reading every single night.
Right.
And it's so weird that we're out of that season. So for parents that are in that season right now, I know it seems like a lot, the bedtime routine and all of that stuff.
But you'll miss it.
You'll miss it.
Before too long, you'll miss it.
And here's the deal. Even in that season, I wish I had maybe not put so much pressure on myself to do the every single night have the same bedtime routine.
Yeah.
And we weren't crazy about it. There were some nights it was just hey, nope, we're just going to go to bed. Or,
right.
We have meeting nights and not every night goes the exact same. So you have to give yourself that grace. But I almost wish I had been okay, every Friday night and Wednesday night are
book nights.
Yeah, or 3 nights a week or something. So it didn't feel so much pressure or that the kids were so disappointed or I'd be disappointed in myself if I was missing something and feel
well,
or even with your frustration when you feel man, I feel bad that I feel bad about it. I know. You don't have that kind of stuff. That's called mom guilt. That's why they call it mom guilt. There's no dad guilt.
Well,
I've never even heard anybody say dad guilt, but
that's
mom
not
guilt
true.
exists.
It's because when we feel like we should do something, we just do it. So then you don't feel guilty about it afterwards.
No.
It's because we know that guilt is real, so we're just never going to do anything that makes us feel guilty. So there you have it.
That's a lie from the pit, but
well,
I like your faux logic.
Faux logic. Yeah, we should do a podcast on faux logic.
Faux logic.
I feel like there's a lot there.
There is a lot there.
A lot of good material.
Here's something to look forward to. The next 4 weeks, not starting this Friday, but we're going to start the Friday after. We're going to do a marriage focus.
Yeah.
And here at the church, we're doing a marriage intensive over the next 4 Sundays that we're excited about. It's going to be a hard thing. It's not just a marriage conference or a marriage class. It's not really something to just bring people in and lift their spirits and be your marriage is going to be awesome. It's going to be hard work.
I think that's clutch, hard work.
Yeah. And we talked about work last week, and what did we say? Work is not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing.
It's an absolutely necessary thing when it comes to
and it's a blessing that you get to invest in somebody that you're in covenant with. Amen. So it doesn't mean it's easy.
So that's in the next 4 weeks, and they're going to be good.
Yeah, so we'll start that next.
We want to kind of carry
next
some
Friday,
stuff over.
Yeah, because we did have to close it because of the size and the number of attendees.
Right.
And so we want to make sure that everybody gets to participate in some shape or fashion. But at the same time, this was designed for marriages in kind of in critical state.
Right.
Which
it isn't a perfect, even the word critical, we talked about this at our little planning meeting, the word crisis or the word critical is so relative.
For sure.
Because people hear that word and they're well, we haven't signed the divorce papers yet, so we're not technically in crisis. Or it's well, we're still living in the same house, so we're not in crisis. But I mean, really, if you live in crisis for a long time, it's not crisis anymore. It's just normal. So
it's true. And I think there's also a part of it that, and if you've been married a long time, you might already know this. Oftentimes, one spouse thinks something's critical and one spouse can be completely oblivious to the state that their marriage is in. And sometimes that means that one spouse is over dramatic to the state and one is just completely, under dramatic.
Yeah.
Completely, oblivious to what's going on within their marriage. But it's going to be good. And listen, to our single friends that are out there that are oh, boo, 4 weeks of marriage talk on the podcast, this is what I would say. There's a good chance you're going to get married. Right. And so it's really important for you to hear these things. And then you don't have to hear them after you got married and you're all stressed out and upset.
Yeah, maybe even important that you hear them before. It's maybe even more so.
Right. So,
hence premarital.
So don't try to skip out on the podcast the next 4 weeks, whether you are single or you are married and you just don't want any pressure or guilt put on you. Be here the next 4 weeks.
Yeah. And be praying for the marriages in our church.
Yes.
Be praying for people who are in crisis of varying degrees and who really genuinely do need a move of God
Absolutely.
In their marriage. So.
Absolutely. It's going to be good.
It's going to be good.
We've also had some incredible weather this week, which I always like to update our podcast listeners on the weather.
As if
because I could have been a meteorologist. I mean, I might as well. Every morning, Zac says to me every single morning, what's the weather for today?
What's the weather? What's the weather?
It's true.
We both have an iPhone that has the weather.
I know,
but every day you say to me, what's the weather today?
I feel like you already know by the time I'm I'm going to look. You already know.
It was like,
There's nothing wrong with that.
cloudy with chance of meatballs. Sunny.
Imagine.
No, but we've had some sunny weather, and it's been so nice, and the crocus are blooming.
And they're so pretty. They're so cute. I love the crocus.
Yep.
Especially because they're coming up out of dead grass.
And you have the daffodils that are just starting. They're coming through the ground, and it's very exciting.
It is.
Lots of seeds planted. It's a good season.
How many seeds do you have planted so far?
I don't remember. 500?
That seems like a lot.
750?
It's amazing.
This is a lot, but I have a lot more to do.
And 500 tulips.
And 500 tulips. That look great. They're so fun.
They do.
That's been fun. That was a good winter project. Kind of like made it nice
Yeah, I hope
to
I
have
remember
those.
that.
Anyway, what's our topic for today, babe?
Oh my gosh. Well, did somebody write this one in, or is this just us?
No, I just thought it was good.
Is it because I say it like twice a day?
No, you don't.
I feel like I say
you don't,
this.
But you say it in a special way. You have a special way about saying it.
How do I say it?
There's a word that is spelled Schemes.
Okay.
And how would you pronounce that word?
I would say Sshkemes.
Sshkemes. Be wise to the schemes of the enemy.
Wait a minute. How many judges was
wise to the
how many
schemes.
judges were in that sentence?
I think it happens when you say
I don't
it.
say wise.
Yeah, I think you do.
Babe, of all your people, I'm not Portuguese.
Wise to the schemes of the enemy. That's kind of Irish.
New
beige. Schemes. We say schemes. I think if you were going to look up the pronunciation, I think it would say.
Like S-K-E.
Yeah, schemes of the enemy.
I don't know. Anyway, wanted to read this to you.
Do you
here.
say schedule? Schedule. You do?
I do. I say schedule.
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 All right, tell us where you're reading.
I'm reading Ephesians 6, and this is verse 10 and 11, I think. A final word, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on all of God's armor so that you will be able to stand firm against all strategies of the devil. For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places. That's the New Living Translation, so it doesn't have
Do you
the
need
word...
me to read the NASB?
It doesn't have the word schemes
For some
in
reason,
it.
that's what I had. This one does.
What do you have?
Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil.
Oh, there it is. There is another passage in, I think, Corinthians somewhere, and it does say, be wise. Be wise to these things. Be wise to the schemes, to the schemes of the enemy. And I feel like that's something I probably quote in almost every other message, maybe every third message. And I think there's a reason for it because, number one, it means you can be.
Right.
Which is kind of remarkable because I think a lot of times we plead ignorance on
It's so true.
what the enemy's doing.
I didn't even see that coming.
What? How did this happen?
What
oh
the?
my gosh. We want to play the deaf, dumb, and blind card when it comes to the enemy. And here we see scripture very clearly telling us, be wise and go ahead and put on the armor. In other words, know that something's coming. Know that there are attacks. Know that the strategies of hell are real. And so I read that and I think, okay, number one, we can know. And number two, we should. Like we should know. And so if you can get it through your head, if I can get it through my head, okay, it is possible through the gift of discernment, through people around me who are helping see things that I'm missing. I think we would probably forego a lot of unnecessary casualties in our lives, a lot of unnecessary wounds and hurt and nonsense.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, just like with the rest of the Bible, there's so many things that we see like scientifically now that like line up with even psychology as far as like our patterns of behavior.
Yeah.
And, you know, you hear like words like triggers and things like that. And it's all the same things. It's all like connected to the same thing where it's, okay, there are certain patterns in my life, or every time I go to this location, or every time I talk to this person, or every time I listen to this song, or every time this time of year rolls around. Those are patterns. So some of that is the enemy has used, whether he used it at the first point of contact, whether it was like the first time you saw pornography, or it was the first time you got drunk, or it was the first time, I don't know, there's so many different things, but these instances that happened and then a seed was planted.
Right.
And so now you're in like cyclical behavior, and cyclical behavior doesn't have to be things that happen every single day or once a month. It could be once a year. It could be once every couple years, but there are certain things that you have not wizened yourself up to.
Right.
What the enemy has allowed to grow in your life, that seed that was planted and that you have not allowed the Lord to uproot.
Yeah, that's good. I wonder sometimes what could be avoided. You know, is it possible that everything could be avoided? Yeah, maybe. I mean, theoretically, like we're never tempted greater than what we can withstand. You know, there's these types of things. But even when it's like the strategy of the enemy just to attack us.
Yeah.
Like forget even getting so far as to sin.
Yep.
But like, I don't even think that this always means temptation to sin.
Okay.
I think sometimes I do think that that's part of it,
right?
In a big way, and I don't want to just not make it about
no,
that.
but just to put you in bad cycles, bad patterns, bad mental state, all of those things.
All that, which maybe you could argue that is sin. It is sinful, but I just think we put the big sins, the big tangibles out front. But really, it's like, you know, the things that put us in a bad mood.
Yeah.
Be wise, like understand, like know that the Lord's giving you armor. Just as the enemy is giving you attack, the Lord is giving you armor to stand against those things, to stand firm and to not be pushed back. Because otherwise, like what's the opposite of that? Okay, so if I'm not standing firm, that means I'm being pushed backwards.
Right.
And nobody wants to think that they're going backwards. Nobody wants to think that like in my walk with the Lord or in my calling or in my, you know, life as a godly husband and head of my household that, you know, I'm being pushed backwards. But that is literally what happens when we're not standing firm.
Right.
We're being knocked down or pushed back.
Yep. And then the shame thing starts. And then that is like just a whole nother cycle.
Yep.
So tell us some things about being wise. Like how can you become wise to the schemes of the enemy?
Well, I would say like the two main like giant topics here are self-awareness, like to know yourself, to like think enough about it, to be aware. And that's a little bit annoying, right? Because we don't want to be accountable even to ourselves, let alone anybody else. And I've been frustrated. I remember going through the Conquer series here at the church a number of years ago and getting frustrated because I was never really good at saying, oh, this is what causes me to like stumble, or this is what leads me down the road of temptation. If you're good, you see the enemy from a mile away. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? He's not on your front porch knocking when you're trying to decide, do I let him in? Right. Or do I run around and try to lock my windows? It's too late. He's there. He's swinging on your front porch swing.
I know. But I do think some of that is, I think people like to live in kind of how you opened this up. People almost like enjoy living in the sense of denial because nobody wants to feel that they're out of control.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like everybody wants to feel like I'm going to make good decisions. I have the ability. I have the self-control. I have the discipline. I have all the things I need to like successfully walk through a situation where the enemy's going to dangle something in my face and I'm going to be totally fine because like I'm in a place right now mentally that I know better.
Yeah.
You know? And so nobody wants to feel like there's anything that they have to be told no about. That's a place you can't go. Those are friends you can't have.
Right.
Those are situations I can't find myself in. Nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah.
Like, because it feels crappy. But that actually is being wise to the schemes of the enemy.
Right.
Being self-intuitive enough to say, I just know myself. I can't do that.
Right.
Even if I'm feeling strong today, I'm still not going to go to the bar.
Today. No, it's good. And I think if you know yourself in relationships, like it's know yourself, know where your weaknesses are, know where the enemy has attacked you in the past, know how he gets his foot in, know know where you sympathize or where you will cater to something. Right. Like even with good motives. But the smarter we get in those places, the less he has on us. Right. You know? Yeah. And there's like stupid things like, I mean, for me, we've had conversations. Today is not the day I can record a podcast. It's not the day. It's not the day. I have to like self-reflect and be like, you know what? It's probably not going to be for the best for anybody if I record a podcast today. But sometimes we have to do that like with, and you know, we say this all the time, the news. To be like, you know what? Doesn't bring out the best of me. Right. I feel myself after. My heart's racing. My blood pressure's up. Probably shouldn't have done that. And honestly, maybe you shouldn't go to your kids' sports games. Because you don't have self-control. Right. And you can't stop your mouth and you can't stop mean things from coming out of your mouth or anger or aggression towards children or other parents. Like you have to be able to like know yourself better than allowing yourself into situations that will cause you to sin. And I would say the second thing is, I mean, we could keep going on that because it's really good. And there's so many ways to be self-aware. But I'd say the second thing is to like really use the people in your life who love you, who are watching for you, who are maybe sensitive to things that you're not as sensitive to, and who know your patterns and know your seasons and behaviors and things like that, and allow them to speak into that, allow people to challenge things. And all that really amounts to is humility. It's like, are you humble enough for somebody that you love or who really loves you to say something hard, or to say, hey, probably should not do that, or be careful with that, or, Zach, do you really think that's a good idea? Like, instead of being immediately defensive and now you got something to prove, just err on the side of caution with some of those things. Because again, it's not worth it. Even if you felt like, no, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm really good. It's like, for the sake of the person who has been praying for you, or who really gets hurt when you stumble, or whatever it is, exercise that caution. Yeah.
And that's why accountability is such an important thing. It covers like a vast gamut of things, but a lot of times we don't want to be vulnerable. But the Christian walk is a lot of vulnerability. There's a lot of importance in the community of believers and the fellowship of believers. And we see that stressed over and over and over and over and over again, especially in the New Testament, of why we're called to bear one another's burdens and pray for one another and pray for the sick and all of these different things. It's because you need those people. You need people that you can be vulnerable with, that are going to tell you like, hey, nope, this is not good. This isn't good for you. If you keep everything that you're struggling with a secret, you don't even allow the people around you to support you the way that they want to be able to, or need to, for your own sake.
Right.
One kind of like practical thing that I've heard in the past is, if you recognize certain like patterns in your life, one way to become wise, like if you feel like, hey, I just don't know what it is, I just am always finding myself in positions or situations that I shouldn't have been in, but I don't know how I got there, or I don't know how I arrived here. I don't know how I arrived here mentally. Like, I was fine one minute, and now all of a sudden I'm like off the deep end, or I'm spiraling. I've heard it said to like, every time those things happen, journal, like write down, what was I doing that day? What did the day before look like? Where was I mentally? This is kind of like emotionally what I was feeling. We had an awesome morning. Like, everything was good. I took the kids to school. Everything was good. And then something happened. And this was where my mind was.
Yeah.
Write it down. Every single time something happens, like an issue that you feel like you're struggling with, write it down. And those patterns you're going to see.
Yeah.
You're going to see those patterns. And of course, a lot of the patterns have roots somewhere else, kind of like what we said earlier. There's a root most likely somewhere that got planted, a seed that got planted that caused a root. And there's a good chance you're going to have to go back to some other things and work through that. But it's a good like stepping stone to say like, hey, let me figure out some of these like patterns and why they're happening.
Right.
So I can, in fact, be wise to the schemes of the enemy.
There it is. And you can't really talk about this stuff without like the following line, which is also very clear and very, very well recited by so many people. But it says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities of darkness and all these unseen things, right? And I think being wise to the schemes of the enemy also helps us to like sort of recalibrate our focus back onto spiritual things, because so often what we want to be wise to is really the.
Did you hear? You just said say wise to. I know, because that's how you do, babe.
See,
babe,
it's your
I
Portugueseness rubbing off on me. It's. I really think that what happens is we want so desperately for our problems to be flesh and blood problems, and it's not that we don't have flesh and blood problems. It's that all of our flesh and blood problems, the enemy wants to use those things to become spiritual problems.
Yeah.
But flesh and blood problems, I mean, you read through, like, Paul is, like, very clear. Like, has all the flesh and blood problems in the world, but that's not really what's determining, where he's at or, what his situation is. It's like what matters to him is what's happening in the spiritual realm. So that's why for us, if our eyes are really locked on, number one, what is God doing? Number two, what is the enemy doing to prevent me from doing what God's doing?
Yeah.
It kind of makes all the flesh and blood stuff take a back seat. And another step is that it helps us to start to see the spiritual stuff behind the flesh and blood stuff.
Right.
If you're
because there are, in fact, flesh and blood things that like are effects.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. But I think that we have to know this going in, because what we'll want to do is just say, oh, the devil's using so-and-so.
Yes.
To me. And it's like, well, maybe, but probably not.
Yeah.
Probably the devil doesn't even have to get involved, because your flesh is so caught up in that that you can't see past flesh.
Right.
If you're in your flesh, you won't see past somebody else's flesh. But if you're in your spirit, then you will see past to the spirit. And that's on both ends of the spectrum. I mean, there's times when my flesh is annoyed with somebody or a situation, and I want to just dismiss it as, oh, I don't need this in my life right now.
Yeah.
And when I say, wait a minute, what's the spirit saying? The spirit's like, no, you need to log some time here. Like, you need to invest in this. You need to like get involved or hear this out, or, no, there's something here for you kind of thing. And so at that point, it's all right, crucify your flesh and dig into what the spiritual matter is there. And who knows that maybe there's something there that's like really good for you.
Right.
That you would have missed because your flesh and blood mistook it for a flesh and blood enemy.
Right.
And then the other side of that is, and this is probably goes along more with our topic today, which is, something that your flesh thinks looks good, or, oh no, why would this be a bad situation? Or why would this be wrong? Your flesh is coming into agreement with it. So you don't really want to hear what your spirit has to say.
Yeah.
But your spirit is like, no, run,
right.
Get away, get
it's
away.
Like you see the yellow light flashing.
Yeah,
but...
yeah. And that can be anything. I mean, what comes to mind?
Like, there is freedom in Christ.
Yeah, exactly.
He whom the sun sets free.
I think what comes to mind is just relationships that are not like God honoring. Stuff that is immediately not like just right away. Like, oh, well, there's very clearly stuff in Scripture. Like, don't be unequally yoked.
Yeah.
I mean, there are very clear things about this. But our flesh, again, will find ways to justify it. And what we're doing is we're choosing ignorance to what the enemy could be doing there.
Right.
We're choosing ignorance, willful ignorance to the fact that the enemy wants to use this to prevent us from achieving like the real call of God on our lives.
For sure.
And again, I think we can whitewash things. We can dress things up with spiritual talk, churchese and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, like just knowing this is or isn't good for you, and then having the humility to let others speak into it. This is kind of a funny story, but I'll share it really quick in closing. I just got back from a pastor's retreat up in New Hampshire. And the second night of the retreat, I ate dinner and did not realize it, but must have eaten something with shellfish in it because I spent all night literally like violently ill in the hotel room, to the point where my wife here sitting with me had to drive 2 hours to come and get me because I was like so dehydrated and like in and out of consciousness that I could not even like make it to the elevator by myself, let alone drive home. So she comes up with Kim and then they bring me home and set me up with Ashley Cadiro.
With the river. Hey, listen, that's a great river plug. Let me tell you, we did not have to go to an urgent care.
Yeah,
we did not have to go to an ER, which we've had to do in the past when you've had a shellfish allergy, allergic reaction, and it was all at home. You got to be at home. The IV bags came to the house.
It's true. I know. I said,
what care?
I said sitting in the
better sign up for the river, friends.
Sitting in the wingback chair in the nice sunny conservatory in our back room, covered in blankets. I said I felt like I was in celebrity rehab with the IV hanging out next to my chair.
Oh my gosh!
With my family.
Where were you going with this?
It's just fun. Oh, where I was going was I didn't have you. I didn't have you with me.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of like how every single place we go, you're like scurrying around with me, looking at the food and being like, "Oh, you better not eat that." Oh, it doesn't say it has shellfish in it. It doesn't matter. That probably has shellfish in it. Like, look at it. And I'm like not thinking.
And I like watch people and you like see people like, oh, they just grabbed that spoon. They used that in that thing. Don't eat that. Don't eat that. Don't touch that.
Not that we eat at a lot of buffets. No. But I mean, you are so conscious as to even say like, oh, we had on Valentine's Day, we had steak and lobster at your parents' house and John cut something on his plate and then was going to move it over to my plate and you were like, and you made him take it back and it was like, oh shoot, why? Because he had been using his knife with the lobster and stuff. And so I was just thinking like there are oftentimes God puts somebody in our life who is wise in ways that we aren't, or who's paying attention to things that we aren't.
Yeah.
And I would have completely avoided eating whatever thing I ate if you had been there. But I know that in the same way, in the spirit now, fortunately, that's just, a few 3 liters.
You don't always have an angel on your shoulder.
3 liters of IV fluid later and, a bunch of medicine and everything else. And I'm back among the land of the living. But I just say that to say, let the Lord protect you from these things by just simply putting on that armor and lean on people who wear it.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And there's truth, just like you said, you don't always have your accountability partner. like walking with you into every situation you go. But that's the strength that needs to be built up within you, and like going through patterns where you've had success. Right. And where you've like had victory over areas, and then that becomes your new cycle. Amen. Yeah. So it's good. It's not over.
All right. On that note, Lord, help us to be wise to the schemes.
Wise to the schemes. And we'll see you next Friday on Our House.
This is Messer. And I'm Willa. This is Our House from A to Z. Thanks for coming over.
Well, isn't that special?
Lock the doors.
Am I in danger?